So I actually have my blood report pulled up because I did a test called the Omega Quant test, and this was back in 2018. And I was curious at that time, given that I was a whole food plant-based eater, but I was not consuming a significant amount of nuts or seeds. And the reason why this is important is because people had told me, and a lot of the research has indicated that if you're eating a plant-based diet, but yet you are not eating a significant amount of nuts and or seeds, then your omega-6 to omega-3 ratio is likely to still remain high. And it's the presence of the nuts and seeds that's actually going to help lower your omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. And I was like, okay, well, let me see if that's a true statement. And secondarily, people had also told me that by not eating a significant amount of nuts or seeds, that my omega-3 index, that literally just the measurement of how much omega-3 fatty acids are in those cell membranes, would actually be quite low. When I actually got the measurement taken, I was surprised. I was very surprised because my omega-3 index came back at a 7.11%. And that was considered, pretty darn good. And hopefully it might even be higher now in today's world. The goal is to try and get that number greater than 4%. And I was concerned, again, from all the rhetoric that I had heard, that my omega-3 status was likely to be closer to 4%. Secondarily, when I actually got the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio tested, you had said that an ideal ratio is a 3-to-1 ratio of 6 to 3. Mine came back at a 3.3 to 1. And I was sitting there, I was like, hey, this is, how fascinating, right? So again, like, there's a perfect example of like me specifically not trying to eat very many a large quantity of nuts and seeds, and eating as cleanly as possible. I mean, literally 100% whole foods at every single opportunity. And that is a recipe for very low levels of inflammation, of an ideal omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, and a very good omega-3 status. So have you also seen the same thing in, your blood work or the patients that you work with?
Okay, so first of all, from the scientific viewpoint, that correlates exactly with our recommendations to our community. And I wouldn't limit it just to rheumatoid arthritis. I would say that my personal view, based on the data that I've seen from the science, is first of all this. Number one, if you're eating a completely plant-based diet, the body creates an improved conversion process from the ALA and the linoleic acid into the body's required needs for these long-chain polyunsaturated fatty acids. And so, again, the evidence is there that people who are on plant-based diet, they have enough cell membrane fats. Okay, we don't need to worry that if we don't eat, say, fatty fish, or we aren't taking fish oil, or we aren't eating nuts and seeds, for example, that we are going to have cell membranes that are like somewhat bizarre or deficient. Right? Okay, so as long as it's whole foods and plant-based, we're going to be okay. Now, number two, this is a common thing that comes up, is like yourself, it's frequently recommended that people eat lots of nuts and seeds, especially those seeds that have a reasonable omega-6 to 3 ratio, like flax and chia, or, nuts, walnuts, for example, are like 4-to-1, maybe 6-to-1, something like that. Anyway, and so you get this concept of, well, if you're eating plant-based, make sure you got to still eat these high-fat foods, otherwise things are going to go wrong. So we've eliminated the first thing, which is you don't need to eat other animal products. What about the nuts and the seeds? So this is what happens especially if this is more applicable to those people who have been on a Western diet up until this conversation and they're listening to this for the first time, or they are semi-plant-based and they're still eating animal foods and maybe still cooking with some oils. What happens is it's the composition, the internal composition of nutrients and fat inside the cells of our liver that dictate the conversion efficiency through those processes that we spoke about before in the manufacturing of the red or the blue sweater. So if you've had a Western diet in the past, your body preferentially creates arachidonic acid over EPA and DHA. It's hardwired to go down the more inflammatory pathway because you've abused it dietarily for the past 10, 20, 30 years. And it's almost like a body's karmic repay of that unfortunate, many times unknowing dietary behavior. So the optimal approach is to stay low fat if we're inflamed, if we have, situations like I help people with autoimmune conditions, because we don't want to run the risk of this preferential treatment through the omega-6 pathway, because 3-to-1 or a 4-to-1 ratio still has that one. Still has that. Sorry, whether or not it's 1-to-3 like flax seeds or 1-to-4 and so on, it still has that one omega-6, which can be preferentially, translated into some inflammation. It is a concept that is found out best through personal experience. And whenever folks are putting chia into their smoothies, or flax into their smoothies, and then they come to me and say, I'm still got inflammation, I say, take your chia out of your smoothies, take your flax out of your smoothies. If you want to eat, some higher fat foods, just wait. Keep things low fat. You will have less inflammation. And with time, with new cells in your body, you will be able to then tolerate more fat. And we see this all the time. So now I actually eat quite a lot of nuts and seeds now, but if I'd have eaten nuts and seeds back in 2006 when I was diagnosed, I'd be like just massive amounts of inflammation.
Right. We also live in a sort of fat obsessed culture, if you will, where the messaging is pretty strong about need to eat fat, have more fat. I even see these like erroneous statements of like, you have to have fat because your brain runs off of fat. And if you don't have fat, then your brain won't operate optimally, which is just complete nonsense.
Yeah, so let's make sure we don't cop some criticism at this point, and let's talk about how to make sure we do get enough of the fats. We're not talking about no fat. We're talking about adequate fat that is optimized for a low omega-6 intake.
Very good.
So we're talking about tons of leafy greens, right? We've got lots and lots of leafy greens. And if you eat lots and lots of leafy greens throughout the day, and you also have a diverse plant-rich diet that are whole foods, you will, even if you're not taking a little bit of chia or flax, you will still be able to meet the ratios. But like you and I like to talk about when we're not, when we're just, off calls, a little bit of chia, a little bit of flax, it's an easy way to have that insurance, so you don't have to worry about it at all.